Got into 5.
Okay.
Now we're back on.
Yeah,
Was this
my
like a
apologies.
debate?
Everybody's meeting's closed out, so we're trying again.
We're getting the real distance learning experience today, you guys.
We certainly are.
Kathleen, are you ready for another question, or
Yes,
should I?
Yep.
Something that was written in the chat that I was curious about. It was about input from the immersion teachers. What communication and feedback is getting, is the district getting from the immersion teachers, and in what ways are they able to share their opinions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe the district started with community in this way as far as starting the process. And I know that my principals, I have a number of the schools impacted, have had staff meetings with their teachers and have brought back their input to the guiding coalition meetings. I don't know of any formal surveys personally. There might have been some principals who conducted that, but at the schools I have, I know my principals have been working with their staff and community. Any other comments or thoughts about the proposal?
This is Tim Aid. Yeah, I have some questions.
Better one, probably.
Concerns.
Representing Franklin High School.
Okay.
Like
Yes.
facilitators?
My main concern is the line that's drawn for the neighborhood attendance and the arbitrary decision to build a wall along Woodward Street. We can see the school from our house,
Mm-hmm.
and yet you're going to send our kids across Powell Boulevard, maybe the busiest street in Southeast, to a school that's not our neighborhood school. We chose to stay here. We've been here for 15 years. We stayed here because of the school and because of the community that's built by having a neighborhood school.
By no means.
It's incredibly frustrating for all of us that live here.
I'm not
I mean,
listening.
really
I was
what we're
listening to
talking
mine.
about is maybe 40 kids that live between Woodward and Powell, 75th or 76th and 52nd. I'm not sure what sort of equity.
Who's the representative? Who's the person say about Franklin High School?
He's just here to take notes.
And taking the
mute
heart
your
out of our
device.
neighborhood.
Hey, we could
Please
please
mute your
have a
device.
mute if they're not speaking. Please mute
Okay.
your microphone.
So do you
if you're
think
not
this would be a
speaking.
good one for me to be in?
Jennifer?
Okay,
Jennifer,
so
you're not muted. I put a thing. Here's what I said.
Thank you.
So I'm curious why anyone would draw a line and to send 40 elementary age kids across the busiest street in Southeast to a school that's not in their neighborhood.
There are quite a few of us that already have to cross Powell to get.
That's not my question, ma'am. It seems like a simple thing.
So at this point, we're not talking specifically about boundaries. We're just looking at feeder schools, the feeder school pattern. So for this
When
proposal,
we talk about boundaries.
Not able to answer the
so we're
question.
just looking right now at the actual feeder schools and which schools are feeding into Kellogg and which schools are feeding in. So I totally understand that, but that I believe is going to be later in the process.
But if you're in a
Can I
school
speak to that?
or getting fed super far away down the line, it's still impacting you. So it's,
Yeah, I can speak to that. I can speak to that question a little bit, Tim. So as you're creating the feeder patterns and determining which schools are going to be in Kellogg, then we need to make sure that Kellogg is within the boundaries of the schools that will be attending there. And if Atkinson's feeder pattern changes, then the boundaries would need to be redrawn so that Kellogg is no longer inside the boundaries of Bridger and Atkinson. So those are the way that those things are tied together. Now, I know that that's not, that you're saying
I can read a map.
that Atkinson, well, I understand that, but that what you're asking is, why isn't Atkinson feeding to Kellogg?
No, the question is, why are you going to send half of the neighborhood that lives between Division and Powell to Creston? That's the question.
Actually, to clarify, Tim, I agree with you. South Tabor neighborhood is actually being split up into 4 elementary schools.
Oh, I know. I read the map. We have a wonderful neighborhood here that's made up. I've gotten to know so many people here because of Atkinson, because of our shared experience, because we all invest our time, our efforts, our love to build our neighborhood school. And it feels incredibly arbitrary to draw a line that's going to move 40 children. I don't see how that accomplishes anything. I appreciate feeder patterns and all of those things. I have older children as well. But what we have here is a neighborhood where kids are growing up together and they're going to be friends for their whole lives. And we're going to change that to check a box.
I'm just going to reiterate that this is just an opportunity for input. There have been no firm decisions made at this point. And so this is an opportunity for input. So please, we are recording your comments, but we're also going to be saving the comments in the chat. So there have been no solid decisions made yet at this point.
You know, adding on to what Tim just said, I live in the Richmond neighborhood that is getting lopped off of Glencoe. Our first closest elementary school is Richmond, which is 0.6 miles away. Our second closest elementary school is Glencoe, 0.7 miles away, or Atkinson, which is also 0.7 miles away. Richmond is off the table because Richmond is fully Japanese immersion. Atkinson is half Spanish immersion. Our next furthest elementary school is 1.1 miles away, and that's Sunnyside. Sunnyside's off the table because Sunnyside is a half focus option. So its neighborhood purview is limited. So this proposal is sending us to Creston also, which is our 5th furthest elementary school. The people in our neighborhood prefer that to sticking with Glencoe if that means we end up going 4 miles away to Madison High School, because that's even more insane. But you know, Southeast Portland has so many focus schools, so many immersion options. You get here and first you think the school is teeming with school options, and then you realize, well, no, that's not true, because there's all these focus schools here. And then you think, oh, well, that's great. I mean, look at all these options we have. And then you look at the lottery chances of getting into them, and you realize what's actually happening is our district is telling us we have to lottery into our own neighborhood schools, and we don't have any chance of getting into them. And now they're setting these proposals where we're going several miles away to outside our neighborhood for school, and it's insane. And I would like to say, as a Glencoe parent, Glencoe did not have any representatives in phase 1 of this proposal. And I understand that perhaps PPS in good faith did not believe that Glencoe was going to be affected, but it became clear on October 22nd that Glencoe's boundaries were going to be potentially subject to change. This proposal changes Glencoe's boundaries in 3 areas. There has been 0 representation from Glencoe, there has been 0 representation from Richmond School, and there has been 0 representation from any Mount Tabor parent whose child would actually move from Franklin to Madison. So there is 0 representation from any single family who's impacted by this proposal. And I think that that's outrageous. And the idea that this is a consensus-driven proposal is just insane.
I have a question. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Those are some really good points. Why now? It's been such a rough year with COVID and everything. These kids have had very little amounts of consistency. And so to us to explain to all of our children, yeah, guess what? Your school might not be there when we go back is heartbreaking, at least for my 2 students. So why now? And I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm also a parent at Bridger. I have 2 students who go there. One of my children is in 3rd grade, the other is in 6th. So I get it. There's not going to be, you know, K through 8s anymore. But I agree with a lot of the parents driving across town when we've chosen a neighborhood it's just so much for families right now that I think it just seems like a big problem. I don't know who it's benefiting.
Can I just, I'll add one more thing and then I won't talk about boundaries anymore. But I would like all of you on the committee and that, and I hope this is recorded and PPS listens to this. We all invested in our neighborhoods, in our communities, when PPS asked for bonds to rebuild, to build new schools, all of that to recreate and help our neighborhoods. It certainly doesn't feel like that faith and trust is being honored right now.
And Jody, thank you, Tim. And Jody, just to go back to your question, the reason or the urgency has to do with Kellogg Middle School opening next year. The construction will be completed and it will help to ease some of the overcrowding at places such as Bridger, which is already split onto 2 campuses, as you know. So that's one of the reasons, as well as the other goals that were represented. And Summie Woods has a hand up. And again, we are recording everyone's comments and input, so I appreciate everyone sharing.
Hi, I have a question on how are you guys going to decide the final decision, like the options? Because you now, to my understanding, there are now 3 scenarios that you guys narrowing down to, and I would like to add that if it's best if you guys can tally up the numbers of affected students and families and choose and pick the least amount of people affected, because I belong, like my kid goes to Woodstock, the Chinese and the Mandarin immersion, and seems like if you guys uproot the whole Chinese program and move it further east, majority of the kids that go to Woodstock Chinese immersion live in the Woodstock neighborhood. So which means all those people, including myself, who live in the southwest, will have to travel like 3-4 miles further east. And that's a huge burden for majority of the families. And I just don't understand, like, if you guys, how are you guys going to make the decision, the final decision? Can you pick something that's least affected to the most people? And it's mind-boggling, really, the options that you guys came up with. And it sounds like no one has even consulted the Mandarin immersion program parents, especially the Chinese speaking families. No one have heard about the coalition until like last month, and everyone's frantic right now.
Yeah, can I say something?
We actually have Joy Poole has her hand up. So I'm just gonna and I apologize. Is it Summie or Summie? I apologize if I missed.
Summie.
Summie. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was getting your name correctly. And so again, this is just an opportunity to give input. There are still 3 more guiding coalition meetings, and then the final decision is made by the school board. But Joy Poole has her hand up, so let's go to her next.
Hi. I feel that there's a lot of assumptions going on, and I'm feeling even more so as I'm listening to all the different parents from the different schools. We have a group coming in who I feel it's coming from a good place, but you're disrupting a whole, like a quarter of Portland public schools for some arbitrary reasons of your own. We all, as I said earlier, we all signed on to neighborhood schools. Didn't particularly like it, not being able to transfer all to certain programs, but we all backed it up by voting for these bonds and all and participating. When Franklin was being changed, the community got involved, and we said what we needed when they're building the school, decide what programs are going to be in there, what type of spaces we need. I know that every other school did the same thing, and you'll see the results are different for each community because it's been specific for each community. Now you're going to flip the communities and make them go to opposite high schools with totally different programs that aren't right for those communities. That's just one of the things. The other thing is the distance to everybody. I mean, you're already talking about it with the other schools. This, you know, Madison, I'm in the Mount Tabor community, and I have one child at Franklin, and Madison is like the third or fourth farthest away. After looking at things for my 8th grader last night, it is faster for her to take a bus to Lincoln. She'd get a better program and she'd get there faster than it is to go to Madison, where she has to take a number of buses. And it's just, one of the children used great words. It's adding cruelly amount of time onto their days. It's going to be like an extra 2 hours once in reality, when it's not COVID and they are traveling. They're in high school. They want to partake in programs and all and better themselves in this world. And you're trying this busing system. And basically it comes down to busing. And we have 30, 40, 50 years of other cities talking and looking at what good intention busing has done. And so I think we really need to slow down this process, get the communities involved, and really think about it. And it's the children, but it's also whole families. Whole families have moved into these communities for these different programs and all, and made decisions for themselves. We chose to do the family. Originally thought we were going to do dual, but we decided it was better for the family. So you're affecting whole families' finances also. Some families chose not to do dual because they couldn't handle the driving and the transportation. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to make those families travel, you know, and they don't have the resources and all for it. So these are just a few things that I would like to bring up. And I know from talking to a lot of people, they feel this way. And I'm going to stop because it's time for somebody else to be able to speak. Thank you for the time.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to go through the folks that have their hands up. The next one is Michael, CSS parent. And then Suzanne, is your hand up physically? Okay, let's do Michael, then Suzanne, and then we'll keep going down.
Yeah, I just want to comment about this option. It seems pretty incomplete when you're taking an entire school, creative science school, and you have no proposal for where it's going to go. It really just seems a little short-sighted, and there really needs to be more thought put into that before you present this as a viable option. If there's no answer to that question, there's just 400 or 500 people that are going to be affected by that, and you can't tell us what's going to happen with that. And it seems like you have a focused school that's working, and you're going to displace them to make Clark School and then put the Chinese immersion focused school. You're just replacing one focus with another focus and displacing hundreds of children and teachers. So it really feels like you need to put a little bit more thought into that and come up with some answers before you present that as an option.
Thank you. Suzanne, and then Mark.
You guys eat your thing? Hi, I've been watching the recordings of the meetings, and the biggest piece of feedback, so I have a daughter who will be in kindergarten next year at Bridger. But the biggest piece of feedback I have is it just seems like there's a lot of data analysis left on the table that hasn't been done yet. Specifically, you know, there's been no mass surveying done. And without that, you really have no idea of what future forecasts will be. They'll be inaccurate, as will the utilization projections, which is the biggest part of this, right? In the beginning, the goals were utilizing the buildings correctly. You'll have no idea how accurate those utilizations will be, because right now the forecast, I should say not you, I don't want to direct it at you, Kathleen. The forecast that Flow is using is 100% retention, which is obviously not going to be the case. The second piece is drive time analysis. That's absolutely, there's a capability to do that, and having net drive time impacts to students. And essentially, this is an equity question based upon demographic. So those are the big pieces of feedback. I just feel like there's a lot of data analysis that hasn't been done yet. But I appreciate everyone's work, and I appreciate everyone being here and being committed to this. So thank you.
Thank you. And Mark, and then Kim.
My daughter is a 4th grader in the Woodstock immersion program, a neighborhood program where she has grown up with the same kids in the same community in our neighborhood. We can walk to the school. And it just seems strange to me that, first of all, there was no representation from the immersion community at Woodstock. But it does seem strange after what is basically a wasted year and a half of school, right? And let's face it, the effects of this are going to be felt for many years to come, right? And a school system that's, decent, that a wasted year and a half we're about to finish. And that next year, you're going to uproot these kids from their communities that they haven't been with for a year and a half, and then plunge them into whatever, is going to evolve, mixing them with kids from all over the place. It just seems wrong, really. And I understand that you're opening this new school and that is presenting you with this sort of urgency, but it does seem like decisions need to be made slowly to affect the fewest number of students, because it just seems everyone's kind of vulnerable now. And I think y'all need to think about this, really. It's been a wasted year and a half, and next year you're just going to add more chaos, much like switching to Canvas at the beginning of this year when we're about to start homeschooling. That was another great decision, but I guess things are consistent.
Thank you. Kim, and then Livia.
Thank you. I just feel that there's a lot of scenarios that we don't have proper evaluations for to come to a conclusion of why 10 was the one selected to bring to the table. It'd be good to see, as Summie said, the number of students affected for each scenario, transportation time and costs for each school, for each scenario, how it affects diversity, and the total enrollment and capacity numbers forecasted with each scenario for each school, presented in a very clear manner, which it's not currently. I'd also like to say DLI co-location is not something that PPS seems to want to do in elementary schools, but as we can see from your flow charts of feeder schools, it seems to be accepted in middle schools. So it's unclear why in elementary schools it's not appreciated, but then it's okay in middle. And also you're not involving outer southeast boundaries in any of this. It's being cut off right at 50th approximately, going west. And we feel that that is not acceptable at this point. And also, I think that going back to the pandemic, I know that you guys want to keep with your regular schedule, but the pandemic is a very different path we're in right now. And I feel that PPS might just want to look at moving 6 through 8 grades only to Kellogg at the schools where it makes sense and not where it's going to cause disruption right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Livia and then Jonathan.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I just, as part of this process, if, the goal here is to sort of promote DLA goals and, DE&I generally, then I would.
In this whole minute.
Livia, I'm gonna have you stop for just a
You were
moment.
there the whole time too.
No.
I kind of want to go to curious.
All right, Livia, could you please start again? Somebody had their microphone on and we could not hear you correctly.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes,
So
thank you.
if the goal of the re-enrollment and re-imbalancing program is, to promote the DLI programs and DE&I generally, then, I'm not sure that's the goals that are being achieved here. As I'm sure you're aware, Herron was formed to promote the Mandarin immersion program and support it. And as I'm sure you're aware, they are against the current proposal with respect to rebalancing and re-enrollment. And I just would like to read the letter that has been sent already. It's not the whole letter, but some dispositive parts of the letter. There are several clear flaws in the board's strengths and outcome goals in the scenarios that would uproot the MIP from the Cleveland cluster and relocate it farther east at either Clark, or I guess now it is Bridger that's being proposed. But 3 of these flaws are most troubling. PPS's perpetuation of systemic racism and segregation, consolidating Southeast Schools' Chinese DLI program in the far east, southeast Portland, very much appears to be an attempt to push Chinese students in the MIP to one part of town and to discourage diversity, integration, and equitable opportunities for these students of color. Despite PPS and its Department of Dual Languages reasoning that locating the Chinese DLI closer to where Chinese-speaking families live would remove the transportation barrier, their optics of such a plan are damning. These scenarios imply that PPS is motivated to cluster Chinese-speaking students to isolate them and keep them in an often neglected section of the city. PPS and DDL's failure to communicate with Chinese-speaking families they purport to serve. According to PPS's commitment to the racial equity and social justice lens, among the questions PPS must consider when making decisions and contemplating strategies are: how have you intentionally involved stakeholders who are also members of the communities affected by this policy, program, practice, or decision? Is there stakeholder support or opposition to the proposal? Why? Herron has spoken to families of Chinese-speaking students in the MIP and learned that they have not received communication from PPS or DDL regarding these scenarios, nor have they been asked where they would actually like Chinese DLI programs to be located. If PPS and DDL had done their outreach work, they would have learned, as we have, that the majority of these families oppose these scenarios and are incredibly offended by PPS's assumptions and presumptive proposals. What PPS is doing and not doing goes against its commitment to support all PPS families. Herron has also reached out to DDL Director Michael Bacon to discuss these scenarios and our concerns. DDL has not committed to meeting with us and instead has directed us to attend the Southeast Guiding Coalition's virtual open house, what is happening right now, where DDL will answer our questions. We are mystified as to why PPS and DDL are not working to engage with us on this matter that greatly affects all the families we serve. PPS's lack of engagement with non-English speaking families. The enrollment and program balancing project materials and coalition workshops are presented in English only, which greatly limits outreach to families whose primary home language is not English. Coupled with the lack of direct community engagement, this means the Chinese-speaking families that will be affected are not being informed of these proposed changes. It is unfathomable that PPS, with its equity goals to break down barriers, has neglected to remove the language barrier in this process. So thanks for listening to that. In addition to that, I just want to note that there is a significant Chinese community in the Woodstock neighborhood. My aunt, who is Chinese, who immigrated from China, she had to leave China because the communists drove her out, lives in the community, and my daughter got to count in Chinese with her 2 weeks ago. And I do not want that to be taken away.
Thank you, Livia. Thank you for sharing that. We are going to go ahead to Jonathan and then Allison. Jonathan, are you still there? You're on mute.
Unmute. Can you hear me? Sorry, I couldn't unmute before. Yeah, okay, excellent. I just had a couple of, this was sort of new information. I'm a Glencoe parent. We actually moved into Portland in April 2019 to move into a neighborhood school that we were going to be happy to send our children to. It seems like a lot of serious changes are being made for special programs. You know, as a parent who has had a child in a lottery, we weren't selected in the lottery, but we were prepared. By entering the lottery, you're making a commitment to go the extra mile. If that's not your neighborhood school, you're making the commitment to drive to a school that's not your neighborhood school. And it seems like a lot of changes are being made for these special programs, but people choose to be in those special programs, except for the people who live in the neighborhoods where these special programs are available. So it's not, I don't know that we should really be accommodating for the minority, not minorities, but the minority of people who select to get into these programs. And then also taking away the feeding of the, you know, these programs from the neighborhood schools. Also, I think that enrollment really is a misnomer. I haven't heard a lot about how any of these changes are going to increase enrollment. You know, if Franklin is over capacity, moving kids to Madison doesn't increase enrollment. It balances the program, which is a term in that we're discussing, but it doesn't increase enrollment at all. Just one other comment, and this is maybe superficial, but you know, right now Glencoe feeds into Mount Tabor, and then Mount Tabor and many other schools feed into Franklin, which is probably part of the reason why it's over capacity. But in the proposed change, you know, Glencoe and Vestra will feed into Tabor, and then only Mount Tabor feeds into Madison, which means that once you're in middle school, you'll only be with those same kids in middle school and in high school. And I think one of the things of going to a new school is that you also experience new people, and that will simply not be the case. I obviously also want to acknowledge that it's a very complicated issue, and this is like nothing is going to please all the people. So, you know, it's great to see that a lot of people are participating now, and that I do believe that these are not decisions that the school takes lightly, and a lot of effort has been put into this. I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I'm just going to clarify that Roseway Heights also feeds into Madison High School, as well as the Rigler students who attend Beaumont. Madison is their feeder school. It just does not show that in the diagram because those weren't schools that were considered in the proposal. And then we have Allison, then Dave and Diana.
Hi, thank you. My name is Allison. I'm an immigrant native speaking parent at Atkinson Elementary School. I can tell you that I have the privilege of being bilingual. I have the privilege of being documented, and I can tell you that many of our families do not, and they have not been heard. And this entire process has lacked representation of the voices that it affects the most. And up until 2 days ago, the materials were not translated into any other language except for English. Some of the coalition representatives that represent those language programs are not connected directly to that culture and are not native speakers of that language. We are hearing from our native speaking families because we've had over 3 sessions at our school to see what they think when PPS is just now asking them, even though they are most affected by this process, or some of the ones most affected by this process. And they are saying things like transportation is an issue. And we know that we have data from the district that our principal shared from us that out of the 56 native speaking families at our school, or Spanish speaking families, only 8 live within the school that is proposed to be moved to, Lent. And at Bridger, out of the 82 native speaking families there, only 12 of those families live within a mile radius of Lent. So the idea that somehow this is gonna, all the Spanish speakers and all like live close to Lent Elementary School, at least in our schools, that is not the case. I also wanna share that native speaking families at our school have cited segregation as a big issue, and fear and safety. So transportation, segregation, and again, lack of representation have all been really big issues for our families at our school. And I just would appreciate that PPS is more mindful of being more inclusive and transparent in this process.
Thank you. Dave, you are next.
Hi, I'm Dave. I'm a parent here at Atkinson. I have 2 kids. I'm going to echo a couple things. I think one, what Tim was talking about earlier, I know that if this proposal goes through, there's a secondary proposal for drawing the boundaries for school. And I think that's what Tim's talking about. And I want to also speak about is we saw that those boundaries lean towards splitting up the Atkinson neighborhood. I would say that somebody that lives between Powell and Division, but would be split off, possibly not going to Atkinson, would be a big concern. One, you know, for our kids have to cross Powell, but also this neighborhood is what our kids have grown up in. For LGBTQ kids, which we have in the neighborhood that rely on the community here for safety and security, I just don't think there's much thought that was put into that. And I know that those boundaries would change if the proposal goes through, right? There's more of this going on. I just feel like the process doesn't have enough data points, or the neighborhood hasn't had enough input into it. So I think it needs to slow down so that we have that. The data points, which somebody mentioned earlier, there's a lot of like livability, walkability, transportation that hasn't been considered for this proposal. And so I just want to voice as an Atkinson parent, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Diana.
Hi, thank you. I just want to, I support a lot of what has been said so far, and my point of view is from a former Atkinson parent and a current Mount Tabor Franklin parent. I take exception to PPS's reduced program inequities and isolation. And what that translates to me and my experience over many years is what's easiest for PPS. And I push back that it reduces instances, or that it reduces robust programming, because I believe that having a school within a school has done nothing but benefit. I'm not going to say it has done nothing but benefit, because I believe that's kind of too broad of a statement. Of course, there's always pluses and minuses to any situation, but overall, and I can only speak at Atkinson, bringing culture diversity into school, inner city schools. For example, our Latino population holding Three Kings Day, Dia de Niños. Conversely, our schools being able to raise enough money to bring a garden program to our school that was shared by children who may go to a school where that school cannot raise funds to bring those kind of programs in. So in my point of view, it is having schools within schools is the opposite of reducing program inequity and isolation. And that's just one point that I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, I was just trying to give everybody some space to speak, the folks who had their hand raised, in order to get everyone's different perspectives. As someone who went through this as a K-8 principal whose school was being turned into a K-5 school, and as someone who opened up a new middle school, this is a very emotional process. And there is always somebody who's upset or disappointed, or like there's no way to do this so that everybody is happy. So again, that's why your input is so crucial and why we deeply appreciate it. And we have, many of your schools do have representatives on the guiding council, if you're some of the schools who are included in this. And I do want to say I'm super proud of our principals of those schools, because they have also made an effort to make sure that they have advocated for their communities and made sure that people were represented who weren't necessarily a part of the guiding coalition. So I just want to put in a plug for our principals at Atkinson, Bridger, and a number of our other schools who have been there every Thursday advocating for their schools. So I appreciate everyone's understanding about how difficult this process can be. At this point, I don't see anyone's hands up. Was there anyone else who wanted to share?
Hi, I'm sorry, I don't think you can see my hand.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's hard because there are 6 screens actually because of the number of people. So yes, go ahead.
So I have a question. Thank you for recognizing that not everyone's going to be happy about this. And I appreciate all the work that the Guiding Coalition has done. I haven't heard anybody say something positive about the proposals that have been made. When I look in the chat, I see nothing but distress. When I talk to other parents, I hear nothing but distress. So I'd like to hear from some parents that feel like some of the proposals that are being put forward are positive, because I'm not hearing that. I don't feel it myself personally. And all I see is the distress that this is causing.
I'd like to speak to that, if I may. I'm Lisa Kensel. I'm a parent of a Creston of 3 students. 2 of them attend Creston. 1 attends Franklin. I have had my children in Creston since 2006. I have had 1 child go through the middle school program at Creston. I have had and attend Franklin, and another one is currently in the middle school program at Creston. Opening a new middle school for our K through 8 students who have not had an opportunity to attend a middle school is extremely important. For those of you who have kids in Atkinson who have gone on to Mount Tabor, you've had that middle school experience. Your children have attended a middle school. There are a lot of kids in Southeast Portland, Arleta, Lent, Creston, who have not had that opportunity. There are programming issues. Students in a K-8 program in the middle school grades do not receive the same level of education that students in the middle schools receive. So this is extremely important for a lot of community members to have this opportunity for their children to go to a middle school. Boundary issues aside, opening a new middle school is an exciting opportunity for a lot of people. And there are a lot of community members that are behind this proposal. They may not be in this room, but we've held meetings where our community is actually excited. Some of the questions that have come out of our meetings are not about this program particularly, this proposal, but it's how does PPS plan to ensure equity across the board for the remaining K through 5 schools that are in the area now that we're going to transition and open a new middle school. Our community is looking more at equity issues. And while there are families that don't want to cross Powell to go to our school, I have been sending my kids across Powell since 2006 without any issues. There's going to be a lot of feelings around all of this. And I think what we need to keep in mind is that this process is to ensure equitable educational opportunities for every student in Southeast Portland. And we're all going to have to give and take a little bit, but try to remember that there are families in your community that live 3 blocks from you or 6 blocks from you that have been doing this for a really long time. They have been on the short end of the stick. They have had to make the concessions in their children's educational experience. So try to keep that in mind when we are all talking about how it affects us personally, and try to remind yourself that this is, we all live in Southeast Portland. Our kids will all attend Franklin or Madison or Grant or Cleveland. They will all go somewhere and they will all be productive citizens. And that's what our goal should be, is to make sure that they get to that finish line and they all have the equal opportunities. I want to thank the committee. This process has been 6+ years in the making. I have been in the district for a really long time and been involved in this process. Southeast Portland is one of the last areas of the city to go through this. This is not new. For those of you that have moved to Portland recently, this has been going on, and other areas of the city have faced the same situation, and they've had the same discussions, and people have had the same responses. I don't want to go to that school. I don't want to cross that street. This is not close enough to my house. Try to keep in mind that we're looking at equity across the board, and there's going to be some issues, there's going to be some give and take, but we all need to keep in mind that it's our children's education as a whole that needs to be the focus. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that Tim has his hand up. Tim?
I do, and I appreciate the comments. I wanted to remind Lisa and everyone that we raised money to build middle school. I completely agree with her points about K through 8. I don't think it's great. I like my middle son graduated from Franklin before it was remodeled and rebuilt. And we all remember, or some of us do, what that school was like, but it went from, I believe, 8th grade through 12th then. And that's not great either. Middle school is important. And that's why we all invested and we all pay through our taxes to have a middle school. Equity is a wonderful word, and it gets thrown around a lot. But what we need is to be specific about what that means. And to me, what it means is that we use that facility, Kellogg, for the best possible purpose for our collective neighborhood. I agree with Lisa that we want the best for all of our children. I also heard Diana comment about, gosh, what's easiest for PPS? I think there's truth in all that, and everyone has certainly our own children's best interests in mind. But I believe that we all also have our neighborhoods and our community's best interest in mind here. And yeah, we talk about crossing Powell and we don't want to do that and all those things. And I'm sorry that you've had to, Lisa. That's a shame or whatever it is. But the reality is there's schools right here that I can hit a 9-iron to that we're going to be sent away from. And that is frustrating. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. And I have Jessica and then Abby. It looks like your hand is up physically. Jessica, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I hesitate to even say anything after I feel like what Lisa said. She said it so beautifully, but I really would encourage most of us in this meeting to look around and see who is in this meeting, whose interest in terms of I can't tell exactly who has what amount of money or whatever, but so many of us have choices. Our interests have been the focus of many decisions that have been made over the course of many years, and to try to think of the whole and look beyond the interest of exactly where your kid is going to end up, and also try to think about what voices aren't being represented and what voices aren't being heard, and the people who don't even have the opportunity to speak for themselves. I just think we need to keep thinking about that when we bring our own positions and I understand these. I think these are very emotional decisions, and there is nothing that is going to make everyone happy, but just think about who's not here.
And thank you. And I do just want to point out that we do have currently groups meeting in native languages. So we have a number of different groups from both Russian, Spanish, Somali, Vietnamese, Chinese, and of course, I don't know how many folks are in those groups, but there has been an attempt to hear the voices of others, and there are additional attempts that are occurring through our communications department. But it would be lovely to have more voices here. I agree.
One follow-up question to that with that answer.
Oh, yeah.
Is there going to be a way for the rest of us to hear what comes out of those other communities? Because that is kind of isolating to, and I understand that there's the language barrier, but I'm just curious if that's going to be available.
From what I understand, all the data from these sessions are going to be correlated and put on the website, the Guiding Coalition website. I don't know the timeline exactly, but that's what has been shared with me. And then Abby.
Hi, I just want to say thank you to Lisa and Jessica for your comments about thinking about the bigger picture. Just to preface, I have 2 children at Creston, and I actually have an 8th grader at Mount Tabor. So for my family, there's been a lot of talk about going to school with our neighbors. Where I live, we're in the Creston attendance area. We don't go to school with our neighbors.
Abby, we stopped being able to hear you, but it looks like you're not on mute. Oh, now she's frozen. Oh, how unfortunate. She finally got a chance to speak. Oh, there you go. You're back again, Abby. Oh no.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes, thank you.
So I'm not sure where I cut out, but I was just preferencing, my family lives on the westernmost boundary of Creston, so we don't go to school with our neighbors. And it's worked for us. It's been okay. I can respect everybody's point in that, but When we talk about distance to schools, there's a lot of us that actually our feeder pattern isn't what's closest to us. I'm closest to Hosford and Cleveland, but our feeder pattern hasn't had us go there. But beside all that, that's just from where I come from personally. I wanted to ask a clarifying question on all of this. And I'm asking this because I remember 7 years ago, sitting in one of these meetings when it was in person, and having these discussions about Kellogg opening and about the feeder pattern and about boundaries. And so my clarifying question is, as we've understood it as a community at Creston, at Arleta, at Marysville, the only shifts that are going to occur for fall of 2021 are schools that are currently K-8s will be converting to K-5s and moving to Kellogg. And I will say that is something we've been preparing for a lot of years. So it's not a shock to our community. We all knew it was coming. We're ready for it. We like a middle school. That the other shifts that will occur, Harrison Park opening as a middle school, any type of boundary discussion won't occur until at the earliest fall of 2022. And I guess then my other I wanted to make sure that I'm understanding all of it correctly. Will the district be, when boundary shifts occur and schools open, will it be one lump, all those kids have to shift that year, or will it start with the kindergarten, 6th grade and 9th grade?
I can only speak to what's happened in the past. When I became the principal of Roseway Heights Middle School, Roseway Heights was a K-8 school. They took the K-5 program, the principal, the teachers, the students, and moved them over to the Rose City Park building. And then the 6th through 8th graders stayed at the middle school. But again, they're
middle school. I guess I'm asking it specific to the boundary changes. So for families that are currently in the Glencoe boundary, that potentially, it's not for sure, but would be potentially shifting to Creston, would a child who's in 3rd grade have to shift that year, or would the shift occur with the incoming kindergartners, and that the students who are already in the middle of their elementary years at Glencoe, would they be allowed to finish out their years at Glencoe?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. And that might actually be part of the discussion, is what is the best thing for students.
I think that would alleviate a lot of people's anxiety.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah,
I agree, Abby. And just to say on PPS's timeline, it does say that it only will affect starting grades of K, 6, and 9. So that really needs to be clarified, like early next week. And along with what is the minimum distance that you will make kids walk, and what is the distance where busing will start? I think that a lot of parents need to know that as this is being proposed.
Great, thank you. And we have Diana and then Angela with their hands up. Diana? Oh, Director Bailey, were you going to respond? I just saw your... No.
Sorry, just took a bite of pizza. I've been in continuous meetings for several hours now. I was just going to say current board policy or current district policy is that when there's a boundary change, students stay and are allowed to stay in their current school up to the highest grade. And we are looking at changing that policy. And there have been cases in the past where we suspended that policy. For example, a couple of years ago when Beverly Cleary was hugely overcrowded, we changed boundaries and we moved kids immediately. And I know this isn't giving you an answer to your question. It's a very good question that we will have to face very soon, is the actual operational steps and timing for this, very complex process where we're opening one middle school next year and the other the year after that, and how we phase that in. And again, I wish I had the answer for you right now, but we don't at this point in time.
Thank you, Director Brooke Bailey. We have Diana, Angela, and then Joy. Diana?
Don't call them out on the thing, you know.
I'm gonna ease my time. I haven't fully thought out what I want to say.
Thank you. I'll come back to you then. Angela?
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela, and I am calling in from Richmond Elementary School, where we are a Japanese dual language program. And I just want to share with the group, after hearing many people share concerns with the scenario that's currently being considered, that I really had kind of an eye-opening experience after taking 2 hours last night to watch the 2-hour recording from last week's work with the Southeast Guiding Coalition in kind of narrowing down to the scenario number 10. And I have to say, after watching that, and I don't know how many people here have, there was only 61 people on that call. I watched the recording myself, so maybe many others did, but it was very eye-opening to see what the process was, how much thought has gone into this, how many different scenarios have been considered, and to see that they started that meeting with, you know, some of the top line concerns and problems that we're trying to address right now. So I think many of us, you know, especially after the summer and hearing so much about social equity and justice, and we're all kind of really behind that and rah social equity and justice, but then when it leads to some changes that each of us individually or as families, you know, are then faced with some changes and some discomforts and that kind of thing. I just want to really encourage everyone to try to think about the big picture as a whole. And as we make changes to, again, focus on the social equities and justice, as well as trying to decrease overcrowding, as well as trying to increase diversity and the feelings of equity within each of these schools, it is going to probably require almost all of us to become comfortable with some discomfort and some changes that we don't like, that we did not expect, that we're not sure how we will manage. And we are still, the 800 of us that have shown up tonight for this meeting are still a very small subset of the entire population. And I was very impressed with the process that happened last week in narrowing down to scenario 10. And it was not an easy process, and not everyone was in agreement. Scenario 10 was kind of the most popular one that people could at least move toward. And you know, what's being presented right now is not the final option. It's kind of the best of what we have, meant for further refinement. And what I would challenge everyone here to think about is, if you are not happy with certain aspects of the scenario, think about, okay, here's what they want to do and here's why, but here's what I think would be better. But you kind of need to follow it to the logical conclusion of, okay, if we change this to make it better, in my opinion, how does that affect everything else? Like, it's such a big picture scenario here that we're trying to fix so many problems, and it's not going to be perfect for everybody. It's probably not going to be perfect for most of us. There are going to be sacrifices necessary for so many of us in order for us to make what I heard a principal in the call last week say, in order to make bold changes and really to affect real change. And you know, as I look at the Richmond JMP, the Japanese Immersion Dual Language Program, we're looking at shuttling off to a new high school, moving from Grant to Madison. And that's a big change for us. Lots of things to consider. But another way to look at it is, what is the positive spin on this? You know, Madison is an underutilized building. The Japanese program will be placed co-located next to other dual language programs. There's some good in that. So while it will be farther for us to go and farther for other families to go, there can be some good in it. And so don't forget to look at you know, what are the opportunities? What are the good that can come out of these changes? And this is such a complex thing, especially after listening to the meeting last week. I was like, wow, there is so much to consider. There's just no perfect answer. And I just encourage everyone to consider the big picture. It's going to require a sacrifice. And it's like sacrifice is the only way to make real good, big change. That's what I'd say.
Thank you. And then we have Joy and then Diana, if she wants to speak.
Hi, I just have a, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me? I just have a comment to make based on what Mr. Bailey said. Because we can't be guaranteed that, sorry about that. Because we cannot be guaranteed that our children won't be changed. I have an 8th grader, so you know she could go for a freshman at Franklin and then be pulled to Madison under the new plan. 8th graders have to make their choices if they want to do any transfers or anything by paperwork has to be in by December 11th before you have the final plan. So if nothing else, the board needs to let the families know whether they're going to get to stay and be grandfathered in or whether they're going to have to be forced to change, because that is a big part of decisions families are making. People are talking private schools, you know, other programs and all, and that is totally unfair to the families. So that's my comment. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. And then Diana, did you still want to speak?
I'd also like a chance to speak. I'm Michelle, so at some point, if I could speak too, please.
Sure. Diana, did you want to speak? And then we could have Michelle speak.
Yeah, I just want to speak just really briefly to the equity issue. And I was hesitant to actually dive into this. I've been super involved in my kids' schools for a long time. And when I initially heard the proposal, I understood that the process has involved an equity lens through the whole process. So I really wanted to have an open mind to what was presented. And over the last couple of days, what I've tried to do since I've understood the proposal is reach out to the community that I know and that I have connections with, the Latino community. And my understanding so far is a bit wide ranging and also incomplete. And so I think that like has been already stated, you know, not having any of this stuff translated is hugely problematic. But having a Spanish immersion program go to Lents, in my mind, I was like, huh, does that make sense for our community of color? And I'm not sure that it does. And so I hesitate to say, we need to accept this because we need to accept change and equity. Well, that's only if that actually is equitable and that actually is a benefit to those communities. And I just think that that is still an open question. So we need to still be questioning whether that is the right move. And I'm sorry to ramble on, but that's my thoughts.
No, thank you. And everybody's thoughts are valued. So Allison. Or was it Allison? Or who was it who spoke before? My apologies. Go ahead.
Michelle, thanks.
Michelle.
No, that's all right. Thank you. I mean, definitely, I echo a lot of the concerns over equity and kind of creating a situation of segregation. I mean, there's many, I'm an Atkinson parent, but there's many families in our neighborhood that depend on the ability to walk to school, but not just to be able to walk to school, but for their older siblings to be able to walk their younger siblings to Atkinson and then be able to catch the bus on Woodward to currently it's Mount Tabor. And so that's one concern, is that we're making these assumptions that families are concentrated in the Lents neighborhood, especially of the Latina communities, and that that's just simply not true. In fact, I believe during the lottery process, it's ranked based on, is this your neighborhood school that you're lottering into? You get a higher ranking for that. Do you have a sibling? There's these sort of tiered processes. And so PPS should have a lot of really robust data on the families that are in our neighborhood schools that are native speakers that we're able to lottery in because that is also their neighborhood school. So I have some real concerns over that. And then the other thing is I can speak to what it's like to travel to another school when you're in a language program. We live in the Atkinson neighborhood. We're in South Tabor. Our school is 3 blocks away. It's actually two blocks away and then down through Clinton Park. And so that's been wonderful. My oldest daughter goes to Franklin, but we started our whole PPS education out at Woodstock, still living in the South Tabor neighborhood. We lotteried in, and my daughter and son both went there, and we did that drive. And I know the congestion of when you're not able to walk to your school, what that looks like in congestion lined up all on all of the major roads and then linking into the schools for drop off. And so you create not just congestion, but you create more unsafe conditions for students. But we did that school for 4 years. Ultimately, it wasn't a good fit for my oldest. And as a parent, I chose to pull my younger child out of the program also because it didn't make sense for me to go to 2 different schools every morning. And so as a family, we made that decision and we went into Atkinson, which allowed my daughter and son to be able to make friends right on their street and in their neighborhood, which they hadn't had before, which was okay because we had originally created a community, not in our neighborhood at Woodstock, but once we were able to go to our neighborhood school, not only were we able to walk to school every day, but also they developed friendships and sports teams and everything else within their neighborhood. So I think that it cannot be overstated enough the importance of community in your neighborhoods and safety for students to be able to safely get to their schools, and for working parents that rely on older siblings to be able to take students. And then also for students that perhaps the only meals they're getting is breakfast and lunch sometimes, and they're also able to walk and get to school in time to be able to participate in those meals, where if they're having to travel clear across town, that's a hardship on families and students and all of that. So I think that that's really important to just mention as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Jeff, you had your hand up. Did you still want to speak?
Yes, thank you. So I support equity concerns. I have those myself, and I'm definitely willing to make sacrifices for those ends. As the chats and many have said, is important too, and I could have missed some of the details, but it's important to, define the problem here. A lot of us are feeling kind of overwhelmed with change and COVID and all this removing us from our schools. It's a stressful time. It would benefit us to have the problem more well defined, what we're trying to solve. What are the equity issues that we're addressing? Why demographics are not included in that is mind-boggling to me, because demographics and equity seem to go hand in hand. Additionally, last point is my kid goes to creative science, and I'm concerned by the lack of the incompleteness of the plan. It reveals, it comes across as a bias towards language programs rather than the philosophy, the program, the CSS program. It comes off as we're moving and we're doing a lot of work to consolidate language schools, to do this and to do that. And there's seems to be no concern for the philosophy and the focus of creative science, as if language is more important than, a learning style that creative science embodies. And so, yeah, it's a concern for the incompleteness of the plan. It just comes across as very harsh when every other school has an identified home but us. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have time for one more comment, and Allison had asked to speak.
Hi, yeah, thanks. I'm just seeing a lot in the chat about the fact that, again, BIPOC families, like, what do they think of this? And again, being a native speaker, and if I've heard the other native speakers from the Mandarin program also speak on this call, we are privileged enough to be bilingual and be in the spaces to express our opinion with the broader communities. Many of our community members, again, are in their own language focus groups, but that means that their opinions are not being shared broadly. So please share those widely with the rest of the PPS family community and student community. And I just want to say that what we're hearing is just, they are not in agreement with this. Like, widely, BIPOC families are expressing that they have not been a part of this process. And they, you know, from what I'm hearing at least, and again, at our own school, like, this is not an issue that is going to work out for them. We know that we have families at Atkinson, Native speaking Latinx families, that have built their housing and their transportation to get to specifically that school, that take 2 buses to get to our school. And that if the program was transferred, they would have to completely change their situation. And that is not an option for them for many, many reasons, because they don't have the privilege to do that. I do. I have the privilege of getting in my car and going somewhere else. Many of our families at our school do not. Thank you.
I know you said that was going to be the last question, but I've had my hand raised for like 15 minutes.
Oh, my apologies. I did not see it. Thank you.
Okay. So one of the other concerns, I'm an Atkinson parent. I have a child in the neighborhood program and a child in the immersion program. So I have one of each. But my comment is about what's enrollment going to look like if we consolidate all the immersion programs as scenario 10 proposes. Are they going to become solely lottery programs, or are they going to become, you know, currently the way Atkinson is it's broken up into a certain number of native speakers from the neighborhood, a certain number of non-native speakers from the neighborhood, a certain number of native speakers from the broader community that lottery in that are not in the neighborhood, non-native speakers. So it's in order to create the balanced community in the immersion program. If everyone's moving to the Lent neighborhood to have easier access for the community, will there even be a neighborhood aspect of people trying to lottery in? And then if you can only lottery in from the Lentz neighborhood, I'm assuming, for the neighborhood role. So it's really it is, when people are saying like segregation, we're really kind of encouraging any Spanish speaking people to move to the Lentz neighborhood if they want to be in the immersion program, any Chinese speaking people to move to the Bridger neighborhood if they want to have a neighborhood spot in the immersion programs. I guess I really have a concern as to what's that enrollment going to look like long term, and how are they going to get that to make it seem to have it be more balanced and have a community involvement. And I would say that Atkinson, part of what's made our co-located programs such a success is the neighborhood involvement. The fact that a lot of families, walk to the school and are involved in the PTA meetings and involved in the after-school activities and the school events. And if everyone is coming from all over town, it makes it harder to become involved in those activities.
Great. Thank you, Christina, for sharing that. And I will just let everybody know that we are saving all of the comments, and this has been recorded and will be reviewed by folks at the district level in order to make sure everybody's comments and perspectives are recorded and brought to the next coalition meeting to be reviewed. And as far as like what would the demographics look like of the school, and what would the school, how many students and everything, all of that information is on the Guiding Coalition page. There should be attachments. There are a number of ways you could do it. You could sit through the 3-hour meetings that we've been doing every Thursday and watch those on YouTube, or you can also access the materials through the website. But I just want to say how much I encourage. I would say that almost everybody who spoke this evening was thinking not just of themselves, but was also thinking of others. And I think that's actually one of the highlights of Portland and the Portland community. And as I said, as someone who's gone through this from the K-8 side, moving to a K-5, and as a middle school principal opening a brand new school and bringing 4 communities together, 4 very different communities together, I will say no matter what decision is made, because whatever decision is made by our board, there are going to be people who are disappointed. Regardless of that, we are all going to have to come together as a community and support schools that could be fractured, and families in whatever way we can. And that's what I found as a planning principal. I was a planning principal for Roseway Heights for 1 year before actually opening the school. There were all these logistical pieces, but none of those pieces really looked at the actual impact on families, you know, older siblings walking younger ones to school, all the things that were brought up in tonight's discussion. And so what I'm hearing from this group is just a lot of heart and a lot of caring, and a lot of open-mindedness. And I just tell you, it's been an honor, even though many of you are not happy with the district at this point and at the decision. I appreciate everyone's perspective and everyone's input this evening. So thank you so much. And we are going to go ahead and end the meeting unless there's anyone who has a last comment to make. And I will go ahead and make sure our comments are filed.
Kathleen, I just want to real quickly thank everybody for your passion, for your input. I've tried to keep up with the chat comments, but sometimes they've been flying by so fast I can't. So I'll have to read them later and review all of the input, not only from tonight, but also from last night. We had a really good showing of Spanish-speaking families weigh in on things. So I'll be interested to read their input as well. I'm looking forward to seeing what the coalition, how they respond to everything, and over their next 3 meetings as they rework the proposal that they brought to you tonight. And our schedule right now is that they will present a final presentation to the board in early January for us to decide by the end of the month. There is on December 1st, the board will have a roughly an hour work session where, well, a couple of board members are really deep into this, Director Moore and myself especially, where we'll bring other board members. I mean, they know the broad outline, but where we get down and dirty in more of the details and start to grapple with how we're going to move forward. So just thank you again, everybody. And yes, we do listen. And I know from my experience, this is an incredibly complex, challenging process. The funny thing is our kids will rise to the occasion no matter how we end up. And I think in a lot of ways, our kids are way more resilient than we are as adults. So hang on to that going forward as well. And thank you again. Don't hesitate to contact me. I have been trying to answer emails coming in around this. There's probably a couple that I missed. I'm meeting with virtually with a group of parents on Sunday. So don't hesitate to contact me with your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming this evening. And everybody have a wonderful night. Thank you, Director Bailey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
All right, good night.
Good night, Beth. Just trying to gather input as much as possible.
Thank you. You did a really good job managing all of that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your input also.
Hi, Beth. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you guys, were you in here
Everybody did great.
Oh, thanks.
Were you in here the whole time? I can't.
No, I've been hopping from room to room. Our room 4 was having issues, and the room that we were in, the link was broken, and it was causing every single link to break.
Oh.
So then
I got thrown out of here at one point.
Yeah, so they shut down room 4, which made it so I was able to hop into all the rooms.
Excellent.
It was good. It was really interesting to be able to hop into all the rooms. So.
And I haven't had time to even start to look at all the comments. Like,
no, I've been trying to keep an eye on it, but
yeah. They said to make sure and save the chat as is a public record. I'm making sure and looking at the coalition.
Yes, I saved it just a second ago, but I think there's been like 3 more comments since then, so I'll do it again.
Thank you. Now I know how to do that. So I appreciate your.
Oh, I
comment.
know. Yeah.
Hey, Martha.
Yes.
Martha, you and Dee and Alexandra did great in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you
You're
so
fabulous.
much. We were trying to stay really present in the facts that we were trying to show, but there's great dissonance within our group.
Yeah, I know. I know. But you guys did great.
Yeah, we're trying to make sure that we get all the feedback so we can do what the families of PPS want and desire, since in the long run, there's no school system without the parents and the children, right? So,
right?
So
I know.
That's right.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. I'll go ahead and.
When will we know, like, if this is going to be permanent? Like, when will we know that when choices have been made? I know that this is going in phases.
Yeah, so you can check. So first, for the guiding coalition meetings, you can check the website and see what happens with the meetings. But I believe the board decision will happen in early January. And I believe that there are, our communications department is continuing to send out updates to families. Which school are you at, Jody?
I'm at Bridger. I have a 3rd grader and I have a 6th grader.
So Melissa is really great at making sure the community, knows what the process is. Melissa Schechner, your principal. So I would assume that she would keep you informed. Bridger is one of my schools, so new this year. So I would assume she'd keep you informed, but you're also welcome to contact me if you have any questions or are just wondering where the process is. My email is just kelwood@pps.net. Feel free to check in and ask.
This is just so hard. Like, I know so many families that I go to Bridger, and so, these are kids that we've, kind of grown up with since kindergarten. And ever since I started going at Bridger, they've been saying like, oh, you're not going to have a kindergarten. You're not going to have a middle school. So there's been turmoil, for the last 6 years and a lack of consistency. We've gone through so many principals. It's always been kind of a mess, but you embrace that as a Bridger parent. And now we've all gone through so many hardships, and these kids, it's awful. And I know so many families that are, from Mexico or have moved here from Venezuela for this program, and they don't live in our neighborhood, and neither do I. And we all, I take so many kids in all the grades. We pick them up, we shuttle them around, because I don't live in the neighborhood either. But I know that a lot of single mothers, they work right there in Montevilla because they could take a bus with their children, drop them off at school, and walk to work. And so now to leave where they live to get their kids on a totally different bus route and then have to get to work, I don't know how families are going to do it.
Yeah, Harvey Scott was also very impacted. It was one of the communities that I work with. I wasn't. Roseway Heights, I still think of it as my school. They fed to Roseway Heights, but by the time the 8th graders got to me, I was their 8th principal since they had started kindergarten, literally. And they had literally in the dual language immersion program, they were so short teachers that they had teachers teaching them for 2 years of their education who did not even speak Spanish, because we just kept going, couldn't find the right candidates with the right credentials, and it's very difficult to recruit great candidates. So, so again, the emotional impact of all of this is something that totally gets lost in all of this. And having gone through it with both my K-8 community that wanted to stay K-5 and then the middle school piece of it, I'm just always reminding the district, we always have to remember this and take this into account, just the emotional impact on families, on students. And it's true what Scott said was actually very true, was that that our students were more resilient than our adults were, because it was also difficult for teaching staff, because I also inherited teaching staff from all 4 feeder schools. So we literally almost had to start a community from scratch, 3 Title I schools and 1 not Title I school. It was quite an adventure, but
kids are resilient and so strong, and what doesn't break us down does make us stronger. And I was a single mother going through a divorce. I've seen my kids get stronger from, problematic situations. But with everything that they've gone through, I feel like the answer from transition isn't, oh, well, you guys are strong, here's more transition. It's just,
that's absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
Bummer.
Kathleen, I just wanted to mention something as well, that we're assuming that all the teachers are going to transfer with their students. That may not necessarily happen.
Not the case necessarily.
Teachers might choose not to go with their DLI program or their focus programs, and we already have, well, PPS, not we, I'm not part of PPS, I'm a parent. But PPS already has an issue with retention of specifically DLI teachers. So we're making this assumption that they will go, and that's not necessarily the truth.
It's a whole process. Like for the Kellogg feeder schools, once they're decided, we'll have to survey all the teachers who have middle school licensing and see who wants to even go. And then it's all in order of seniority. It's all outlined in the PAT contract. So it was a very complicated process when we opened Roseway Heights. And I see there are a few people still on here, and they're trying to pull me into another meeting. Hi, Sarah, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I just wanted to say, as someone who was in the small group with you, Kathleen, with Bridger parents, one parent who is in the neighborhood program and one parent who has 2 kids in the Spanish immersion program. It's been a huge learning curve for me. I have an Arleta student. So my sort of view on this has been very different, and it's been great to learn more about Bridger. So Jody, I just wanted to say, as someone who's worked a lot with Bridger parents, specifically on the coalition, what I've heard a lot from our parents, our Bridger parents, is that there is already a fair amount of segregation happening with the Spanish DLI kids, because the kids who are transported in miss out on all the after school programs because they have to leave as soon as school is over. They're shipped out. And so one of the things that we've considered is that with an all immersion school, it could be built in that those kinds of programs and enrichment experiences could be more available for all kids, rather than having a weird segmented section of children who end up getting pulled out every single day and don't get to have that extra enrichment and part of the community. And I don't know where that falls for you. But I just wanted to share my viewpoint as someone who's been on a small group with Bridger parents, that is part of what we've thought a lot about.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Zhang, I see that you're still on. Did you have any questions or comments? You haven't had an opportunity to speak this evening.
I don't know if he's there.
Okay. I just wanted to.
Sorry. Yeah, I am here. I have some screaming children here. That's why I was staying on mute.
Hi.
Sorry. So I'm trying to go into a room where there's like less noise. But my main concern is I grew up in Chicago, and I seen some firsthand situations of what segregation does to our community, or it does to a city. And it's been decades since Chicago had to deal with it, and they're still dealing with the effects of segregation right now. And right now, what I'm witnessing is essentially pushing all the minority programs into outside of the city skirts, and this very much feel like a segregation issue. I feel like if we don't address it, Portland's going to be a very different city in a few years. It's very concerning and distraught for me, actually.
So may I ask you, are you for this proposed move, or are you not stoked on it?
Oh, absolutely against it. This
Okay,
screams segregation.
I feel like it's actually okay. So in like what you're talking about, like certain children in the Bridger community missing out on after school activities, it doesn't seem like the answer to that would be to move everybody. It seems like for a small group that's impacting, we could find other transportation issues possibly. I don't know, because even moving, I don't understand how that's going to eliminate the problem, because by moving the school farther out to Linz, where other people will then have to find transportation there, and then with work schedules and everything else, won't just another group of kids not be able to do after school stuff? Won't that be an issue everywhere once families are forced to move?
Yeah, and one of the issues with the Mandarin immersion program, I'm not very familiar with the Spanish immersion program, but the Chinese community is not just in the Harrison Park area. We're all around. We actually moved to Woodstock. Me and everybody in my son's my son's class right now have moved to this area to be in the Woodstock neighborhood for the school.
Which brings diversity in.
And a lot of the, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, that's the same. I was just reassured and agreeing with you. That's the same thing that we found in Spanish DLI. Specifically, we have undocumented individuals in which they have been able to work out, deal with renting companies or individuals to be able to move closer to the school that has the Spanish DLI program of their choice.
Especially at Bridger, bringing more people of color to the Mount Tabor community is huge, because if that wasn't happening, what would that whole community look like? It's making that entire zone more diverse. I mean,
And they are calling us into another meeting in just a moment.
Okay.
Marilee,
hello. My name is Marilee. I am a parent of yes, I'm a parent of 2 children at Atkinson's. We were living by Bridger and we were pushed out due to gentrification. When I applied for Atkinson's, I applied for my son to go to Atkinson's, Mount Tabor, Franklin. I went there when I was a child. I cannot raise my kids in the neighborhood anymore. I've had to live in subsidized housing on Killingsworth. We already commute to Atkinson's. My daughter, I applied for Spanish immersion. She is in kindergarten now. My kids, our names are Eva, she's in kindergarten, and my son's in 4th grade English program. He transferred from Spanish immersion because he has learning disabilities. If they pull out the DLI program, that school is going to be less diverse. My son might be one of the few brown kids, or it could close, and he's not going to have the services he's needed. I do not want to commute to Lentz, another marginalized community, when I'm living in one. I don't get to live in my neighborhood, and we already commute. You're going to make me commute farther and to 2 different schools. This is not equitable. This is segregation. The Chinese community is being segregated, and they're going to have uproot after 22 years at Woodstock. The Japanese did not have translation for these meetings. And a lot of Hispanic people just got Spanish translation. Was it yesterday? So a lot of people's voices are not being included. Well, I can speak loudly for the Latinx community that we do not want to move. And so I do not feel that you guys are saying this move is equitable. It's not equitable. My kids will have to go to 2 different schools. They'll be separated, and I have to commute farther. I'm just gonna have my kid go to Harvey Scott for Spanish immersion right here in this neighborhood that's already low income and marginalized. Why would I commute to Lentz? And they're gonna put all the Hispanic people in a lower income neighborhood past 82nd, when gentrification has already pushed people out. You're gonna push people out. So I don't feel that this is right. And it's all the immersion programs are going to go to all immersion schools. So then the other schools are just going to be more wider. And you're saying it's for equity. It's not. So that's my opinion. Thank you very much. Would really encourage you.
We are actually getting closed out at 8:25. So just any last comments, Beth?
I want to say I would really encourage everyone to make sure that this feedback goes to the district, because the other proposal that was not pushed forward was one that maintained co-located K-5 schools. And there were a lot of us on the coalition that really wanted to present both options to show the difference between what it looked like with a K-5, with co-located K-5s versus standalone K-5s. So I really want to encourage you to make sure that feedback gets in there. And I just do want to say, because I don't know how, the logistic piece at the middle school is so different than co-location at the high school, or I mean at the elementary level, I mean. So when you're thinking about bringing strands of DLI together at the middle school level, it really does create a stronger program for all of the kids in DLI and neighborhood when you have multiple strands of DLI at the middle school. So like instead of just one, like just Atkinson's DLI going to Mount Tabor, that makes it really hard for scheduling, and it kind of locks those DLI kids into a segregated program where they're the only kids that they see. Whereas if you have 3 strands of Spanish DLI in a high school or in a middle school program, then there's a lot more flexibility in scheduling and a lot more integration of those 2 communities. So think about that when you're looking at feeder patterns of 2 separate co-located elementary schools coming together into one middle school program can be a strong way to support DLI families.
Thank you, everybody, thank you for those comments, Beth. Thank you to everybody for coming this evening. We are closing out the meeting at this time. But again, I have my email address is kelwood@pps.net. You're welcome to send me any questions or comments, as well as submit your input through the district. Have a wonderful night, and thank you so much again for your input tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fawn and Mary Lee. Your comments were really helpful. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.